Hello and welcome to the How2Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. So I'm here today with Brucker, Krafft, and Tarafdar. Did I get that right? Just why don't you say it for us also? Because that's what he was teaching me how to say his name correctly when I clicked the go live button on him and messed him up. So tell us one more time.
Just reference a giraffe, but starts with a T. So Tarafdar.
Tarafdar. All right. So
there you go.
So I always start off, kind of giving people a very high level. So Ali and Brucker have created a company inside of the acquisitions and merger space that address a very unique market opportunity that we all see is coming. It's not a good one. I mean, it's not a nice one. It's just something that's going to happen, and we have to deal with it. And we're going to get into that later. But I always want to start off with, who you are, what you're up to, kind of how you got where you're at now. So, let's start. I guess Brucker, you're on the top of my screen. So tell us about yourself, kind of who you are, what you do, kind of what got you here where you're at now.
Oh man, life's just a series of forks in the road, right? And ultimately you wind up where you're at. So I was a career soldier by trade, got banged up, got out. I was in the Army for, 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. Was a Green Beret, got out, had some dark years, and ultimately realized that I didn't like working for other people. So I started my own company without writing a book on it. I started kind of a construction-related company, eventually involved into electrical, alarm, security, things like that. Eventually took on a partner. We scaled it up to just full tilt general construction, electrical from low voltage jack all the way up to a industrial transformer switch gear. So I kind of realized that I had a little bit of a lack in business knowledge, and had an epiphany one day that was just kind of bing. I need to grow my company through acquisitions. So I started educating myself. I went to Harvard Club just to kind of learn a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. And since then, I've been scaling my company up in that regard. Met Lana and Ali, and through some time, talking with Ali and Lana, we just came up with this brilliant concept, being Labruta Capital, and here we are.
Awesome. So went from, active duty military, actually, serving the nation, and now serving a market that's going to really need your help. So I have a lot of respect for that. Thank you for your service. I served in the Air Force for a little while myself. I always tell people I wasn't in the military. I worked for the military. So I was in, but it was kind of a joke. I was in the Air Force, and I worked at military intelligence, which means I sat at a desk and put X's on buildings for people to blow up, kind of thing. But, all my friends that were in the other branches that actually had to, carry firearms and face danger, that's, to me, is like the real, like, really in the military. We all committed, our time and our energy, but, what you did out there is just totally different from what I would have done, considered myself doing. So,
man, what's cool is I was an 18 Fox, so we're the only intelligence personnel on the planet that put together the intelligence from the ground up, or receive various intel to put together a packet for whatever our ultimate goal is, and actually action the target. So, man, that was a lot of fun. It was a good time. I enjoyed it. I miss it.
I enjoyed my time, and just great people there. So let's just jump over to Ollie. Ollie, same question. Like, tell us about yourself, who you are, what you stand for, kind of how you got from wherever you want to start. I never make people go all the way back to the childhood or anything, but start wherever you want to start and tell us how you got here and what you're all about.
Yeah, man, sure. Yeah, definitely not as exciting as what you guys gone through. But let's put it this way, perspective-wise, I left Canada to go to the United States in 2007, pre-housing market crisis. Let's just put it that way. I was super excited about the opportunities there. I met a couple of investment bankers, and we decided to put together a firm, DNA Advisor Group at the time, to do debt restructuring and mortgage modifications, create portfolios and sell it to institutional investors who are outside of our country, just so that they can buy into it. So essentially, I was one of those people that crashed the market. I joke. That's not true. But no, man, it was fun, man. We were doing settlement amounts of like $600-700 million a month at a time. Through that connection and obviously working hard, I came across, private families that were investing large amounts of money into the markets. And we always hear about these institutional investors. We think investment banks and so on and so forth. We never really think singular individuals or just private families. Through that connection, obviously I worked hard to cultivate those relationships. One of the hardest things I learned was, there was no way to sell these guys. If they find value and they will approach you, you can't approach them. And, through the hard work and obviously being an integral part of making sure that their risk is mitigated through the procedures in which I took a very keen liking towards personal credit because the housing market crisis put a lot of people in the streets, So my fundamental belief was, look, even as we're making a lot of money, you still have to look out for the people, the average person that's actually allowing you to use, their estates and their deeds and so on and so forth to create the products that you're creating to make the money. So I took a huge liking towards personal credit, decided to commit to that just a couple of years ago, launched a small YouTube channel to educate people on personal credit, create programs to help them as well outside of investment banking. And secondary practice is that, and from that perspective, got into acquisitions like you guys. Obviously, we all met at a very similar place. But from that perspective, I think what I learned was, just be authentic, man. Like, obviously people the really wealthy and institutional people, if you want to do large deals, make a lot of money and build wealth, you have to be authentic. There's nothing that would give away, a person who is not really being themselves rather than the person, how they conduct themselves and how they do certain things. So action dictates who you are. So through that, obviously I met Brucker, you guys, honestly, I couldn't be happier where I am today. So there's no complaints there,
So awesome. What you were talking about there is I just learned about this after hearing, joining the Harbor Club and getting into the acquisitions and merger world. I've heard of institutional buyers. I've actually heard of the SPACs. I've heard of all the, going IPO and all this stuff, but I've never heard of what a family offices was. And I thought it was, something that, something you guys named a group. And then I heard it again on something, on another thing. And then I guess it was yesterday or two days ago, one of my favorite news sources called The Hustle. It's an email newsletter. Great writers, plugged them, I guess, there. But they wrote a whole thing about it, and I guess there's trillions of dollars sitting around in these family offices. And it's one of those, I guess you don't know about it until you know about it. And, knowing about it might not be it sounds like knowing about it's not the only answer. You can't just solicit them and go, hey, I want you to invest in this. They have dedicated people that hunt out opportunities for them, and you've got some of those connections, right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
That's right.
So we touched base kind of at a very high level, but let's just jump right in. Tell me about Labruta Capital and what makes it unique. Tell the listeners, what your unique proposition is here. What are you addressing into the market space that we all see coming?
You want to take it, Ali, or you want me to jump on it?
Go for it, Brucker. I'd like to have it.
Due to COVID, various economic influences at the moment, the American economy's taken one hell of a lick. Okay, business owners are surviving on PPP loans, EIDL loans, various state grants, and they're unable to conduct business as they were, and business owners are becoming more and more distressed by the day. They're finding themselves just buried in debt, and essentially, a lot of these businesses are in high distress, borderline insolvent, and getting ready to go bankrupt. So, we were discussing it, and what we realized is that what we've done is we've put together the ability to come in and separate the business owners from borderline insolvent, distressed businesses, from their debt, from their personal guarantees, preserve the integrity of the business, okay, as long as it meets certain criteria, i.e. one of those that we create a massive or a substantial delta by removing the debt from the business. And a delta is just a ratio saying that it becomes profitable, whereas currently with the debt load that it has, it's not. So really, it's really altruistic, Ron. We have the ability to save the economy one business at a time, preserve the livelihoods of the employees in the business, provide them the ability to keep putting food in their children's mouths, save the business itself, ergo further and impacting the economy in a positive way, and save the business owners from, essentially foreclosure, losing their assets and losing their livelihoods. And that's really our end goal. That's what we're going for here.
One of the things I see, prior to COVID and prior to, any other major catastrophe in the world, somebody going, facing insolvency or facing, bankruptcy, your natural inclination is to believe that they did something wrong, right? They did mismanaged, took out, over leveraged or something. But in this case, what I see is we're running into a lot of companies that had the revenue to support the debt structure that they took on. Maybe they went through major renovations. Maybe they got into an equipment refresh. Something happened. They increased their their debt to income ratio and didn't worry about it because they were making money. COVID comes along, shuts them down for months. And now they're in a kind of, a lot of these guys are still in rebuild mode, even though things are starting to move again a little bit. They just can't cover that debt. So I don't think this is necessarily, I played in, Ollie just said he worked in the foreclosure world and what happened during 2008, 2009 when a lot of foreclosures happened. I was on the other end of that. I did a lot of short sales. I owned a real estate investment firm that bought a lot of houses out of that. And more times than not, if you really looked at what happened, is two things, right? The economy did a couple of things, but the homeowners were buying houses way more than they could afford. And then it didn't take just a little bit of shift, for something to happen, and all of a sudden they can't pay it. Insurance premium go up, interest rate change, anything to happen, and all of a sudden they were facing this. The banks were allowing these people to just totally over leverage. That's not the case here. These are good business owners, and in the most part, these are good business owners who made sound decisions, and the one thing they didn't do is disaster planning, right? What if the world turns upside down tomorrow? And that's just, I don't know too many business owners that do that. So other than let's cover like kind of the scope of this. Like we're not talking your mom and pop shop that has $100,000 in debt and they generate $200,000 a year. What's the scale that you're looking for inside of this program?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when you typically look at these type of models or businesses, we're looking at anywhere between, if you have a debt size and, our model really, the purpose of our model is not to literally take over the business in a sense where we are becoming owner operators, but rather we're assuming the position of their creditors. Like that's what we're doing. Our initial responsibility is like any, if you look back at the foreclosure industry, Ron, as you're familiar with this, is you would assume a position of a lender and then you'd go through strategic foreclosure processes to, amicably end a certain default situation, right? The same is here in the business side of things where we'd step in and we're assuming the role and responsibility of the creditors in which we are doing something called a friendly foreclosure. The purpose here is to replace their initial creditors. And therefore, for us to actually consider a business that would be worth it for us, we're typically looking at the creditor's size and worthiness should be at minimum $500,000. And even at that, we get challenges because you have to keep in mind that the people who are siding with us are institutional investors and family offices. We don't have any small investors. And when you're putting out dry powder, which is liquidity sitting in the banks, some of these guys have assets of a minimum $100 million. Right? And they need to deploy them as quickly and as efficiently as possible while making the maximum impact. Hence the reason our business model makes sense. So at best and minimum is 500,000. It can go as high as 250 million, which may be, co-partnering one or two other families. The objective here is, if that's the size that we're dealing with, usually what happens is the process is a lot easier because the paperwork as which we would do for 500,000 is almost as anything similar, or if not easier with 250 million. Because it's a lot more institutionalized. The documentation is a more streamlined process with those debt sizes because, they covered their tracks really well, in a good way, that is. So that's the typical size and range. Now, that's a huge range, but this gives you an idea and perspective of, how we work and why this would make sense for us.
And from an investor's point of view, somebody like myself who would find one of these companies and bring it to you, we're looking at, what's the value on the other side, right? We're looking for, if the debt was negotiated off and the debt structure was more favorable to the business, would this be a business, that could be grown, repackaged, sold? What's the real value on the other end of it, right? So most of the time, that's not going to be a huge problem. So I think I was reading some of the stuff you guys have, and it sounds like one of the things that I caught on is you had three key phrases you like to use, and I'm going to read that. It's called preservation, protection, and freedom. So tell me about where that came from. Is it preservation of the jobs and stuff? You guys talked about a little bit about that the last time I spoke to you.
It's preservation of everything, Ron. Preservation of the business owner. Like you said, a lot of these business owners weren't mismanaging their business. They just weren't capitalized well enough to keep their head afloat through these storms of times that we're in economically and for the business owners. So it's preserving the business owner's financial integrity, their credit, their livelihood, their assets. It's preserving the jobs of the employees, and it's preserving the business itself.
So I can see, that's a huge impact. Right now, I honestly think that there's a lot of people counting on another EIDL loan or another PPP loan coming out. And at some point that all stops. Yeah. And when it all stops, if they haven't been in full, recovery, I think you guys are doing this, with foresight to see that this is coming. I honestly see that we have another kind of a bubble setting out there right now. And some of them will make it without, guys like you guys, and they'll figure it out. And other ones are just going to absolutely have one or two choices, right? And that's to lay everybody off, try to save as many assets as they can when they go through bankruptcy, put at risk their personal assets, their personal liabilities, all the stuff that goes along with going through a foreclosure or going through, in this case, a business bankruptcy. And, those debtors trying to recover assets. So one of the things that caught my attention is you spent a little bit of time in addressing, or tell me about addressing the business owner's personal liabilities and making sure they have a safe exit or a safe avenue out of the mess that has been created by this situation.
Sure. So if you look at it in a situation and a perspective, a lot of business owners, you're right, Ron, and Brucker even addressed this, is, you guys are looking at perspective of how the businesses are undergoing support right now. EDILs, PPPs, additional loan structures that are provided by government, incentivized. I'm going to give you this answer, but in a holistic approach. Allow me a couple of minutes so that everybody gets a clear perspective of why this makes sense. I'm thinking of it not just from a perspective of an economist, but also as a banker and a person coming in from the Federal Reserve side of the matter in terms of an analyst. And if you continuously start supporting and printing money and providing substance to business owners to continue surviving and thriving, what happens is, at the capacity of how business owners are operating due to COVID restrictions, you're already having like 20, 30% capacity at best. Some of the businesses, service-based industries, obviously we can see a huge bash in that, because what you used to have where you'd have to eat into the restaurant space or you'd go out and you give tips and so on and so forth, that used to rotate the economy quite nicely, right? On the other side of it is there are certain levels of quantitative easing that's going to cost inflationary, in a situation of inflationary things, to have the standard of living going really, really high. At which point the supporting infrastructure is not possible unless otherwise you're taxing up the wazoo. And that's going to be almost an impossible situation because you don't have businesses to support that tax infrastructure, right? And another situation you have is business owners who are extremely conservative in reference to the decision-making aspect of whether to go through a business bankruptcy or forced liquidation of whatever personal assets they have in order to satisfy creditors and the balance of those creditors or whatever shortfall they can. And the reason as to why is because they're already too deep in to actually even consider that as an option. So with all that said, when you're personally guaranteed, like including EDIL, they're actually personally guaranteed there as well. They don't know this, but it is a fact, right? So when you're personally guaranteed, you have personal assets that you really have to consider, the risk element of those personal assets. So a business owner is always going to have a very hard decision coming to that realization that, okay, well, I have no choice but to do this and execute this because it is what it is, right? So if that be the case, what's going to happen is now they're stuck between a hard place and a rock because the decision-making factor is impeded by the ability to think clearly because there's personal involvement in that. There's their sensation of personal, emotional level of thinking about family, about, preserving of those assets, right? So one of the biggest things that we do, and the reason why Labruta makes sense is because we realize that, right? Before we even step into the transaction, we look at a person's well, business owner's personal balance sheet, we realize that that's an issue. We have programs in which if they have personal assets and they wouldn't otherwise qualify for a program, or the creditors may have to go after them, is we can actually set those assets and put them in a protective custody. And this is the biggest tool that we have. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure, Ron, you already know what kind of assets and structures we put together. But the way in which we do it, the business covers all those costs because of the restructuring model we initiate. When that happens, you'd qualify for our program. And upon us taking the position of your first position creditor, there are secondary creditors you've signed personal guarantees with. But the beauty is the business would be restructured in a sense to cover those obligations for you. It's the one and only insurance program in the United States by far that I know of that we can say we confidently can preserve the personal guarantee of business owners and create a protection plan around that. And hence the reason we have the freedom word at the end of the 3, right? So now they can go out there and hopefully in the future do another business and so on and so forth without worrying about where their personal assets are going, whether they have to liquidate, whether they have to get wage garnishment for the next 60 years because they have $2 million to pay and so on and so forth. So all these type of things are in consideration. So this is why Labruta Capital exists. We thought about all the different angles that possibly can go wrong and will go wrong. Murphy's Law, that's our best friend in these type of transactions, just a heads up. But we look at all that and, we calculate everything we can and then we structure that. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's a very long answer, but it needed to be as clear as possible.
No, I think it is clear. So what's that?
Yeah, and Ali mentioned freedom. I mean, put yourself in some of these business owners' positions as well. Freedom from the stress, man. You're laying in bed at night. You have this King Kong of a monkey on your back, wondering what's going to happen. How are you going to make it through tomorrow? What are you going to do? How are you going to turn it around? That's just from a stress management and your personal life perspective, that's an impossible and a terrible place to be. And it's freedom from that. I've been there personally whenever I first started my business, and it's a rough spot. And so we're happy to be here.
So it sounds like you guys have a real grasp on what it's going to look like to take control of that debt and negotiate it off and stuff. So as far as business debt goes and as far as, just this whole process goes, are there any common myths out there about maybe bankruptcy or this, there's no way to negotiate this off. I got to do this. There's any common myths out there that you really think that we should take a second or two to debunk?
Yeah, I mean, and Brucker, if you're okay with this, I'd like to give it a nice little. All right. So the personal thing is, a lot of people treat this like, oh, you can just simply walk up to a creditor and be really good with them and polite, and somehow they'll agree to your terms. The reality is everybody's hurting. Creditors have toxic debt right now that's sitting on their balance sheets as well, and their incentive is recovery. It's not necessarily to step in and run your business or operations. They're already looking at how to liquidate those assets. So the biggest misconceptions I see a lot of business owners make is thinking that somehow everything is negotiable, right? And the reality is not at this time, right? Not at this time. And the reason I say not at this time is because the expectation of this whole situation with the pandemic and COVID was a 2 to 3 month time frame at best, with isolation, self-care, certain types of restrictive business practices that would somehow slowly but surely remove all this type of situation with people falling sick or hospitalization infrastructures being at full capacity and eventually slow things down. That was an anticipation. Now, however, that was a completely miscalculated anticipation because human factor is, these things you cannot control that. You have to be very cautious in how that happens. So what ends up happening now is this anticipated 3 months is now 12 months, 13, 14, 24 months. What happens with the balance sheet of creditors now, there's a huge and tremendous amount of pressure from shareholder equity for those sitting on the boards and those sitting on the decision-making aspect of creditors deploying the liquidity into the markets to say, look, I need you guys to go and fetch right now, like as aggressively as you can. We're not going to put out those little chihuahuas to go fetch a bone. We're going to put out some pit bulls to go fetch an entire body, right? And that's what it is. And they're, albeit it's a very politically correct way of saying it, if you look at the situation, it's as aggressive as they can possibly be, but passive aggressive. Right. And as they come to the market and they start to collect and they start to deploy strategies of, let's say, foreclosure or aggressive, forcing into Chapter 13 bankruptcy and so on and so forth. If a business owner is not equipped to understand the language, the tools to use, the laws around those tools, and the structures that are available to them in order to deploy them as quickly and as efficiently as possible instead of waiting until you're too far gone down the road, then you don't know what you're doing. So in a sense, like your business owner, I'm not disrespecting their ability to negotiate, nor do I disrespect anything that they do in terms of their business. I think they did pretty well so far pre-COVID and so on and so forth. It's just this is a situation that is a very unknown territory to most. And because we come from that background, we saw the housing market crisis, we saw insurance product CDOs being created in front of our eyes. I don't even go into the quantitative derivatives, and the quadrillion dollars of databases that we have to go through. But if you look at the situation and how that unfolded really rapidly and quickly, and the government programs that were put into place to essentially, bail those situations out, guess what? Back in the day, taxpayer dollars were supporting that. Today, though, taxpayer dollar is, how much person capacity? Barely any. You see what I'm saying? On top of that, they're printing money to support. So can you imagine the level of aggression, the frustration that's happening behind the scene, and the planning that's going to go into making sure that creditors are whole and to make sure that nobody's going to lose, right? So business owners have to understand that narrative before they even approach this. Once they understand that narrative, then they have to leave it to professionals who understand the space and have gone through that chain, and they're already seen a certain type of event that happened in the past that we would have undergone and understood it, in a very sincere level, to be able to give the guidance and support that we need and create the infrastructure for them to ride on that support. And it's not any type of, programs that you can just say, I need a grant or I'll negotiate with my creditor. It's a completely different conversation in that perspective, right? So I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. I think that there's a parallel inside of when we did the, home foreclosures and negotiating debts off of real property, real estate assets. And I would constantly get calls where, I got your letter, but I talked to my bank and they're not going to allow a short seller. They're not going to negotiate on debt. And the common, theme with that was like, look, they told you that, but they cannot tell me that. I know the laws, the rules, and I know who to report them to if they don't. Right. So let's take a look at your financial situation. I'll tell you if you're qualified. I'll show you, where you're, where you're qualified and where you're not, because I know the process. And if I think we can do it, we'll take it on. Our service is free. So I think that there's a little bit of that too. I'm afraid that there are going to be business owners that hear about this. They'll hear this audio and they go, I'll call my bank and say, hey, I got these guys that might be able to negotiate this, debt with you. Would you work with them? That's not the right approach right now. I don't think that banker's not going to tell that business owner the same thing that they would tell trained professionals that know the rules, know the laws, know, what the process is. It's a totally different situation. So I think I want to throw that myth out there. Is like, if you call them and they tell you no, doesn't mean that they're going to tell us no, or tell Labruta Capital no, right? There's a different process, a different way of contacting. Most of the time, these business owners wouldn't even be contacting the right person. If this is anything like the other world, right, the foreclosure world, then there's actually resource and asset managers and other people at the bank that handle this type of stuff, to where you guys aren't going to be contacting their lending officer that made them the loan. You're going to contact a wholly, totally different, set of people. So, what do you say to like business owners that think that, I don't know if you guys can do this?
What do you mean, Ron?
So the self-doubt that actually kicks in. So somebody's going to hear this and go, my bank's already told me they're not going to negotiate this. I have to pay the full amount or I'm done. What do you say to that? Like, give us a shot anyway, or what, what is it?
Reach out to us and call us. It's kind of like in every aspect of business, or at least in all of my businesses, I try to find someone better at it than me, right? And that's why they're all doing so well. I realize that sometimes I have to get out the way for it to see its ultimate success. And it's kind of the same thing for business owners in this position. It is similarly parallel to a real estate short sale, but it's infinitely larger. It's like that on an infinite amount of steroids. It's just a monster whenever you get into massive business debt. And they may tell a business owner that, but that's not the reality of it. Bankers realize their books are highly toxic. Like Ali said, they have tons and tons of bad debt on them, especially right now. The lending institutions, for the most part, need us just as much as the business owners and the businesses do, to a degree. But sometimes you have to get out of your own way to achieve your ultimate success, right? Find somebody better at it than you that actually knows what they're doing.
Awesome. So we all see this coming, and I'm going to tell you to put on your fortune teller hat, pull out your tarot cards, whatever it takes to forecast the future for me now. Are we looking at this starting to trickle in, say in the next quarter or so, or is this just going to blast us toward at some point? What is your gut feeling on how fast it's going to dial up? Kind of if you really look what happened inside of 2007, 2008, 2009 with the housing bubble, it happened pretty fast. Probably over a span of probably 6 or 8 months, it got from like not on the radar at all to being a real problem that everybody had to solve, and it took some time to solve all of it. Are we looking at that here? Is this going to just ramp up super fast, or what's your prediction? You guys, you're the ones with your eyes on this ball. Where's it going? Where's it coming from?
So I'm not even predicting it personally. I've been in conversations with high-level officials in multiple banking institutions and friends of mine that are in those positions, and the writing's on the wall. Business owners and businesses in general are in absolute survival mode right now. A lot of the things that you mentioned with businesses that are going to happen, i.e. mass layoffs, surviving off the government grants and subsidies and whatnot, that's already taken place. Everyone wants their PPP loans to be forgivable, but that doesn't mean they can't lay off a half, 3/4 of their personnel, only keep the essential ones on and filter that PPP money into them, PPP money, and then, fund the business through the EIDL loans. But everything's about to peter out, man. Everyone's been in survival mode. So unless you're well capitalized or can well capitalize yourself very fast and very effectively, yeah, it's going to bust. I mean, I anticipate. So they are rolling out a new EIDL loan. I got an email from a construction company, I think yesterday. It may be kind of niche marketed than I got was, so it won't be applicable. If the one I got is applicable to every business. As these subsidies run out. So anyways, I'm talking a circle. Back to my banking friends. Everyone from every banking organization that I've talked to anticipates 3 to 6 months that, their back's against the wall as well, like Ali was saying, and they have massive pressure from above because they're trying not to belly up as well, right? Everyone is. The entire economy essentially is in survival mode at the moment. But people that know a lot more than I do and that are a lot better at it than myself anticipate 3 to 6 months.
So we're looking at 3 to 6 months from the pretty much last handout, or 3 to 6 months from now. So if they issue another EDIL or another round, is it going to push it out for most of them, or is it going to push it out for just some of them? Or
everyone's clinging on by a thread, man. Everyone's hanging on by the skin of their nails. If they push out more money, people will be able to hang on a little further, just kind of hoping for their ship to come in, hoping for that turnaround event, hoping for the standards or the regulations to become more lax where they can conduct business as they did. Unfortunately, a lot of people are finding, and a lot of various business owners that I've talked to are finding that they're not even currently, in spite of all of the grants, the subsidies, the free money, if you will, or at least that's the mentality of it, they're still not capitalized well enough to take advantage of the market coming back to normal. They can't even fund it. So if they do roll out another set of EIDL loans and PPP loans, man, that's strictly survival mode. That's not enough. That's enough money to maintain existence, but it's not enough money to reinitiate operations for a large portion of businesses out there, especially ones with massive overhead and lower profit margins. Manufacturing spaces. Oh, I think we lost Ali.
But he just texted me. Yep. So let's have him jump back on. I think it was his connection.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Ron?
It does. Hopefully he'll jump right back on.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure that was his connection because the rest of it looks pretty good here. So
yeah, pretty strong on my end. But yeah, so it won't be long if they keep rolling out money. I mean, where's this money coming from? We're going to pay for it eventually. We've already paid up front for it, and we're going to pay on the back end as well. You can only keep giving out free money for so long. But even as business owners are receiving the money, and God knows they can use it, it's still in survival mode. That's just enough money to exist, not enough money to recapitalize and function and begin operations again.
So right now, people are going through this. We're talking about it, but these business owners are living this. They're waiting on that next PPP loan. They're not EDI loan. They're trying to shift, or what do you want to call it? Make a change to adapt to this market, and they're struggling. What piece of advice should we offer them now, as far as, look, keep us on your radar, or it's never too early to talk to you guys, or what can you say to somebody that's they're in the mix, they're listening to this, they're trying to find a way out, what can we say right now to those individuals who may need us, sooner than later?
If the writing's on the wall, or if they're living in fear, overwhelmed by stress, go ahead and reach out to us. If they're viable, if we can say, look, you don't need us, you just perhaps do this, this, and this, and it's probably all going to be okay. We are happy to do that. But if the writing's on the wall, come on to us before it gets to a point that it's irreversible. You can only ride a ship so far beneath the water before you're at the bottom of the sea, right? But if they can hang on, reach out to us regardless. We're all very kind-hearted people. We want to see everyone succeed. That's the reason that we're doing this, is the preservation of, businesses, owners, employees. It's a terrible place to be whenever you get laid off and you have to figure out how to pay your mortgage, pay your car notes, put food on the table, buy your kids the new school uniforms because the other ones are too small. And we're trying to prevent it, essentially. And if they have that perspective right now, if they feel like that is inevitably going to happen, go ahead and come to us while we still have something to work with.
Okay, I got it. So are there any resources out there right now that can help them along the way? I know there's the Small Business Administration and some other stuff, SCORE and those type of things. But if they're in the mix, right, and they're actually like not knowing whether or not they're going to survive, what are the resources out there that they can reach out to get some assistance, either guidance-wise or, maybe financial?
All right. Brucker, you want to answer this?
No, you go ahead.
All right, man.
Yeah,
so it's always funny because I see Brucker is ready and I'm ready. And I'm like, oh, let me just give it to Brucker. But, the way it is, Ron, is obviously SBA and other resources, scores and stuff, their support is there for their – in their head, they're prescribing that you somehow have an operational business and you're not too far gone down the road, like I always say, and you have some sort of sustainable element there. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we look at things, let's look at it in a perspective of like everyday living. We look at, oh my God, I got to go to the doctor because it's a reactive situation. It's never a preventive, right? Same thing with, oh my God, I got sued. I need a lawyer today. Again, a reactive situation. Why would you not prevent this lawsuit from happening? Right, or this disease from happening. The same consideration is, these resources, if you're thinking, oh my God, I'm anticipating a big contract for my business, hopefully the cash flow will help us go for a couple of months. That anticipation is not guaranteed. It's an anticipation. What is guaranteed is what you have control over now. And what you have control over now is being preventive rather than reactive, right? So albeit there is a lot of ways to look at SBA and other resources and tools, I think the biggest resource you have, and the best one, if you have a proper team, that is your accountant and bookkeeper. And a lot of people would say, well, that's not true. They're just responsible for the bookkeeping. Not really. They're an arm of your business. If they're just doing accounting and they're replaceable and they're a commodity, they shouldn't be in your books in the business in the first place, right? An accountant's responsibilities like R&D, tax credits, certain efficiencies in your system, helping you create IP, helping you create infrastructure that can help you support your business because they're doing the math for you every day and they're in touch with the government bodies that can help you and support you. So perhaps discuss and have a lengthy discussion with your accountants. And sit down with your team. Maybe they can come up with some ideas to help. A lot of business owners have way too much pride, and it's not a bad thing, but you got to let it go and you got to learn to communicate. And this is the time everybody's got to survive and look out for each other. So think of the accountant, think of educational platforms, think of your team and ask if there are, ways to come together and come up with a plan to see if there's a sustainable infrastructure we can work with. And at best, things don't work out. And obviously you behind everybody's head, you have tried. And that's the first thing. Is it too late? No. That's why Labruta exists, right? But even at that, like I'm giving you guys resources of preventive strategies and reactive. And if you understand that as a principle, then you'll never lose in business, right? For example, a lot of people came to this realization, like you said, Ron, that they don't understand crisis management and so on and so forth. But if you think about it, there are intelligent businesses out there that they understood the model of captive insurance. It's a IRS tax strategy. It's a 10% you can give away to another LLC that you control, and you can put that money away. If you had 10 years of that, you basically had a pretty good year worth of revenue set aside for a business potentially to help you go through the hard times, at which point you can leverage this as a security to get a loan and so on and so forth. So there's just so many different things that you could have done, and that would have been a preventive thing, right? Don't plan for disaster, right? You have to plan for opportunistic way of conducting a business and surviving, but anticipate disaster, right? And once you do so, what happens is everything you do is put together in a very unique perspective. But what I'm saying is those resources that's available to the public is given the fact that they just put something together for these guys and let them handle it and let them come to their own conclusions. But you already have team. You already have an accountant. You have employees there. I'm pretty sure they have the heart to stay in those jobs because it's in their best interest to do so. So collectively as a unit, we should all come up with strategies to see what we can do together. And once you come to that realization, nothing can hold you back from coming up with creative solutions. And I promise you, 5 heads are better than 1, right? So that's my opinion on this.
Awesome. So one of the questions I always like to ask is, you're in my shoes. You're sitting in this camera, and if I didn't think my software messed up, I'd drag your monitor you over in my spot. But we're not going to do that because we dropped you earlier. So if you were in my spot and you were interviewing Labruta Capital, what questions would you have asked? Is there something I missed or something the listeners need to know about who you guys are, what you're up to, that we haven't addressed on the call so far?
The only thing I would add, Ron, and I think we've kind of touched on a little bit of everything. The only thing I would add is that we're in your corner. You're not alone. These distressed business owners, the stress that they're living in, the circumstances, the environment, you're not by yourself. We're on your team, and we want to see everyone win. And sometimes that's a good feeling because especially a lot of these people feel like their back's against the wall. It's just them against the world. It's just survival mode right now. And you're not alone. Reach out to us. A lot of people have already reached out to the various government organizations and entities that you mentioned a couple of earlier. We've had people reach out to them as well just to say, hey, listen, we exist. We are a lifeline for these business owners before they just completely belly up. Have them reach out to us. Let's see if we can help them. But we haven't been able to get a hold of a single person because they're all overwhelmed. They're just completely covered in people calling them nonstop as well. So we haven't even been able to tell them that we exist. But realize as a business owner, after calling, not hearing anything back from anyone, no form of help visible at all in the near future, we're in your corner. We have your back. You're not alone.
So what's the easiest way for the listeners to actually reach out and get a hold of you?
That would be you, Ron.
Yeah.
Okay. So in full disclosure, I've been talking to these guys for a while, and I've actually agreed in my acquisitions and mergers role to help find and help these companies. I have a heart for, not allowing somebody's legacy to disappear on them. So I'm interested in this. So if you're interested in hearing more, learning more, or whatever, I'll go ahead and post out a way to contact me. You can reach through LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way. That's my LinkedIn. It's if you just Google or search on LinkedIn for Ronald Skelton, or there's the link right there. That's how you can reach out to me. It's the easiest way. Or my email address. I'll say it and I'll post it in the comment sections of some of the places where we post the video. And that's me at forsell2sold.com. And it's the number 4, SALE, the number 2, SOLD.com. Me at forsell2sold.com. Send me an email tell me you have a business that needs some debt restructuring or needs me to look at it. And I'll be glad to sit down with you on Zoom or phone or whatever it takes. And we'll have that discussion. So how else? So the final question is always going to be, how can the listeners help you? Is there any information you need out there? Is there any resources you guys, if somebody could, answer one question that moved Labruta Capital forward, how can my listeners be a resource to you guys? Is there something out there, some list or database you need access to, or I'm reaching here?
I'd say instead of being a resource to us, be a resource to these business owners that are in distress. And being a resource to them, just put them in touch with us. Let's see what we can do. And they can do that through you. You can go to labrutacapital.com. But be a resource for them.
Awesome. Is there any last words you guys want to share?
No, thanks for having us, man.
Yeah. It's good, man.
It's been a blast. Today's show is also brought to you by the Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind combines the traditional peer-to-peer mastermind introduced first in Napoleon Hill's famous book, Think and Grow Rich, with accountability partnering, where your peers help you ensure that you set goals, take actions, and get results. If you want to scale, blow past roadblocks, and achieve success faster than you might think is possible, I suggest you take a visit over to TIEPM.com. That's TIEPM.com and check out the Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind.